Now that you have all three of the balls in the image, what I'd like to do is I want to show you how to clean up some of the layers that you have. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in. I just want to reiterate again some vocabulary about layers. You have your layer visibility. That's the eye. Is it visible or is it invisible? The layer thumbnail, that's giving you a small preview of what's on that layer. And then your mask. And then this is the name. So you want to really pay attention to which one you're clicking on. But right now, what I want to do is I want to name these layers. And it seems like not that many layers, so it doesn't really seem like it's super important. But in future tutorials, we're going to have a lot more layers. And it's going to be much easier for me to tell you, hey, go to the soccer layer. And when you've got a huge amount of layers, it's going to be much faster. Also, it just helps to keep things organized so you can find stuff. So I'm going to turn off the visibility one at a time just so I can see. Okay, so this is the volleyball. That layer is the basketball. And that leaves this layer for my soccer ball. Okay, so just basic layer management. So inside of this layer panel, we've got all that stuff set up. What I'd like to do is I would like to hide this basketball slightly behind this little sand dune, this little small spot here. So let's try some things out. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to turn off the visibility of all of these for a moment. And I'm going to look actually just at the basketball. So I'm clicking on the move tool. I'm going to move, oops. I have the wrong layer selected. See how I just moved that one? I actually want to move the basketball. The basketball is a little big in my opinion, so I'm going to shrink this down just a little bit more. And I'm realizing as I did this, there's some like little gunk right up there that I did not clean up when I recreated this one. So I'm going to go clean that real fast. So I'm going to Control plus and zoom in. I'm going to grab my lasso tool. I'm going to make sure that I'm on my basketball layer. I'm going to choose the mask. And right now I'm going to use my lasso. If you have a steady hand, you can do this. You might have to zoom in a little bit tighter. I'm going to loop around so that's there. And now I'm going to use my brush. I just click that one right there. It's the P or the B tool. B is in brush. And now when I paint with white, see what it's doing is shining a light on what was hidden. I actually want to paint with black. So I'm going to press the X to flip the color. And I'm going to just drag that across. So that way I can kind of clean up that edge. Okay, let's go back here. So what I want to do now is I'm going to turn off the basketball layer. I'm going to zoom back in. Let's Control plus. And I'm going to take my lasso and I'm going to try to trace around this darker shadow. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect right now. I'm going to show you a way to fix this. So down here, I don't really care about that part. I'm just kind of grabbing that. So a little hard to see on the screen, but there's these little dotted lines. What that means is that's the only area that I'm going to be able to paint in. So I'm going to actually mask out this bottom portion. Even though the ball is on top of the sand, I'm going to make it look like it's behind the sand. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to come up here to where the brush tip is. And right now it's a hard edge. A hard edge is going to make it look like I cut this out with a paper, like a hole puncher. It's got that really sharp bite that's taken out of it. That's not going to be really useful to make it look like it's fading. So I'm going to Control Z to undo. And I'm going to switch the brush to 0%. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my brush a bit bigger. So I'm using my brackets. Well, it looks like it's automatically going in there. So I'm going to click away. These little quirks with Photopea, they're slightly different than Photoshop. Just bear with me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my brush pretty big. So right now it's about 600 pixels. And I'm going to click. Now I'm actually going to make it just clicking on this outside edge. And you can always undo. Just remember, you can only undo up to 30 times. So that becomes a little bit harder if you click too many times. Now I'm going to make my brush smaller. So I'm going down to about 150. And I'm slowly just tapping and dragging across here. Kind of doing the same thing. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger, and I'm just kind of tapping along this outside. I'm going to press Control D to deselect. It actually looks kind of cheesy. Let's see if I can tap down here. That's starting to look a little bit better. Now, if you end up going too far, you can always flip your colors using this little piece right here. Just make sure that it's always black and white. If for some reason the color is off, press the D and it'll bring those colors back to being black and white. And then you can actually tap across the top here to kind of bring that back, or bring it back that way. So what you're trying to do is I'm making the brush even smaller, and I'm going to go in and bring back more of that ball. So what I'm really looking at is where that line is actually at, so that now when we zoom out a little ways, it looks like the sand dune is on top. So even though the basketball is above the volleyball layer, just by fading that portion out, it makes it look like it's kind of tucked behind. Now we're going to do a similar thing to the soccer ball. What I'm going to do instead, though, and you may have to undo this a few times, that's fine, just practice, is I'm going to go ahead and grab my brush. I'm going to go to the soccer layer and make sure that it's visible. And most importantly, click on the mask. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger, so I'm pressing my right bracket. And I'm not using the entire brush. I'm using kind of the edge of the brush. I need to make sure that black is there. That's going to hide. It's turning the lights off. And I'm just lightly tapping around the edge to try to make it look like it's maybe shoved down a little bit harder into the sand. If I go too far up, it's going to look like there's like a big chunk of it missing. So if that's the case, I'm going to have to hit X, and I can start to bring that back a little bit. Edges are going to be the really important part in making it look a little bit more realistic. And it becomes a little bit of just kind of eyeballing it and trying to decide, does that look real or does that not? I think I took way too much off in that middle part. It's making it a little more see-through. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, and I'm going to use my bracket keys to shrink down. And I'm going to flip the color again. So I'm pressing X. So a lot of this is about black and white on the mask and being able to bring some of that back. That green little dot there is kind of throwing me a little bit, so I'm going to tap that one out just a little bit. Now, from a distance, it's going to look a little bit cleaner. When you're zoomed in super tight like that, it's going to be a little bit off. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to actually create a new document and move these pieces over before we work on getting the text there. So we're going to start over here. We're going to go to File and New. I want to trim this down just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is we're going to do 1280 by 720, but I want it to be taller than it is wide. So right now that's the opposite. So I'm going to click this button right there. That will flip the two pieces. So make sure it's 720. PX here. I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the name of this and call this Trace Bolas and create. What I want to do now is I want to move all of these layers into that new document. So let me show you how you can do that. If you click on the top one or the bottom, either one will work. Hold down the Shift key and select the opposite. What I mean by that is if you have the bottom, if you hold the Shift key, the next one that you click, it'll grab all of the layers that are in between. Now move to your thumbnail, hold your mouse button down, keep it held down, drag it over to the new document that you're creating, and drop it in here. Now, this is way bigger than your original image. So what we need to do is we need to resize all three of those. So to do that, you're going to click on volleyball, hold down your Shift key, click on soccer. Now we're going to zoom out, press Control- 2 times, and now switch to your move tool. So you can see that image is giant compared to the new document size that we're using. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this around. You'll notice that there's these little squares. These are the bounding boxes. I'm going to move this square kind of towards the center, and this red line pops up. That's telling me that it's perfectly centered. Now I'm going to zoom out a little bit more because I want to grab the top corner of this. So I'm going to press Control minus. Whoops. Hit minus. Click inside of here. Sorry. That is another photo P thing that should have worked. I'm going to switch to the move tool. And now I press Control minus. There was 1, 2. I'm going to do it 3 times. So now all the images are there. So we're just resizing this image. So this will take a little bit of time to get your head wrapped around. If you run into problems, let me know. I'm going to grab this corner. I'm going to hold down the Shift key. Then I'm going to click my mouse. Then I'm going to start to drag. And as I start to drag, I'm going to also press the Alt key. So I'm going to remind that again. Let me zoom out I'm going to stop for a second. You're going to grab the corner. Wow, it's really laggy right now. My wife is recording a video in the other room, and it's really slowing some stuff down. All right, I'm going to blame her. Don't tell her. Okay, so I'm going to come back here. I'm going to hold down the Shift key. Shift keeps it proportional. I start to drag. And now, as I'm dragging, I'm going to also not let go of my mouse. I'm not let going of the Shift key. I'm going to press the Alt key as well. So with your left hand, you can hold down the Shift key and the Alt key. And what that does is it resizes based on that center point. So now I can start to shrink it down a little bit. And we can always adjust this here in a minute. I want to be able to see all 3 of those balls on the beach. And now I'm going to Control plus to zoom in. And now I notice that the image needs to be moved down. So now I'm going to use my arrow key. I'm just going to nudge this down a little bit. Little laggy again. Or you can hold your mouse button down and click and drag. You want to make sure that you can see all 3 edges of the ball. If it's not there, zoom out and you can grab one of these other corners. Just make sure you're holding the Shift key down when you are dragging, or else it's going to distort the image. I'm actually going to just manually move one of these balls. So right here, the basketball is out of the screen. But the basketball, because we brought the whole thing over, it shouldn't be missing. So let's take a look. Going to give it a second for Photo P to catch up. There we go. Going to grab the basketball. I'm just going to nudge, zoom in, nudge this basketball over a little bit. There we go. And now you're ready to add the finishing touches on with setting up the text at the top of the image in the next video.